Our next presenter is Paulina Aguilar Delgado. She's majoring in criminal justice with a concentration in victimology and will be minoring in psychology. Paulina worked with another student, Maya Nunez, who's not able to be here, and they were mentored in this work by Dr. Francisco Alatorre in the Department of Criminal Justice. The presentation is titled Examining Gender-Specific and Trauma-Informed Care for Traumatized Homeless Women. Paulina.
It's called survival, honey. That is what one of the 7 participants of the study told me when she was sharing her life story, particularly the domestic abuse situation she was a victim of, one of the many things that ultimately led to her homelessness. As part of the research team, it was amazing to see the research objective, the premise from which we had departed of, so tangible, so explicitly stated by one of the participants of the study. It was precisely because of that we wanted to examine the care provided to homeless women who had been victims of trauma, especially because of the complexity of their circumstances. That is what motivated us to analyze the care provided to them given 2 main factors: the participants' gender-based needs and their previous trauma experience, which oftentimes involve men being victims of situations in which men are the perpetrators. Being homeless undoubtedly entails living in a permanent state of awareness that is ultimately exhausting for the individual. In addition to that, many of the women who end up in a homelessness situation have been victims of circumstances that cause psychological and/or physiological damages from which it is reasonably difficult to recover. Through my mentor, Dr. Francisco Alatorre, we then got in touch with St. Vincent's de Paul program Ocean Manor, a mixed-gender transitional shelter located in Phoenix, Arizona that mainly serves homeless adults, and arranged to recruit some of their participants, some of their adult female residents as participants of the study. The research project focused on a qualitative approach that determined if the women would be participants of the study or not. And if they met the requirements, through a screening process. The screening process consisted of 3 questions that determined if they would be participants of the study or not. If they met the requirements, then they were part of the research study and of the in-depth interviews the research team conducted, on which they were asked their perspective of the care provided at the shelter, the environment among the residents, and their perception of safety and comfortableness. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this research project was conducted entirely online. The interviews were then transcribed and coded. The codification consisted of drawing recurrent themes among the participants, for instance, safety and comfort, threat from other women, threat from men, perception of the agency, emotional and mental health needs, religious and cultural needs, and women's needs. The research team then interpreted and analyzed the data, looking at each interview transcript, but also looking at the transcripts as a whole. From that analysis, we could see that in most cases, the participants received assistance and support to heal, although such support could be improved. The participants also reported that emotional and psychological needs were essential for the recovery process, and they felt that they needed more support in that. Surprisingly, threat from men, did not represent the main issue for the women interviewed in this mixed gender transitional shelter environment. And although a couple of incidents were reported, it was not a general concern for the participants. On a personal level, this project will be continued as part of my honors thesis. Although there will be an integration from the staff's perspective on the shelter environment. But also on an applied perspective, undoubtedly understanding the challenges faced by traumatized homeless women is the first step towards a problem solution design that offers better quality care for homeless people, as well as better opportunities for reintegration into society. Additionally, this is setting the stage for these types of programs and their policy improvements, as well as for voicing current issues in shelters for homeless people. I like to think that essentially we were providing the microphone they needed in order to speak up. I would like to end with a quote from the American novelist, poet, and author of Moby Dick, Herman Melville. "Nothing exceeds the criticisms made of the habits of the poor by the well-housed, well-warmed, and well-fed." I would also like to thank my mentor, Dr. Francisco Alatorre, without whom I would not be able to conduct this research, my parents who have always supported me, and the amazing people at Oak Center Manor and ATP. Thank you.
Do we have questions for Paulina?
That was wonderful. I'm wondering if your definition of trauma includes folks for whom the homelessness itself is the trauma, and if the treatment that you're looking at would be different depending on the extent of other types of trauma.
Yes, definitely. That's a great question. Actually, because for some people, trauma might be different. Some might qualify trauma as, I don't know, a car accident. Some people might qualify trauma as a psychological event. And for us, we use the SEMSA definition of trauma, and it definitely departs from the perspective of trauma as homeless people. It is definitely a traumatic event being homeless, because you have to be aware of your surroundings all the time, so we definitely took that into consideration as well. Thank you.
I have one, no one else does. So my question is about your recruitment of participants. Did you find a reluctance by some people to participate and talk about their trauma, or how did that negotiation go about who could feel like they were in a safe enough space to speak?
Right, that's actually a good question. So as a first-time researcher, for me, it was kind of, it was a fear that I had that some people might not want to speak up. We fortunately had a lot of people who were willing to participate. 10 homeless women, 10 residents of the shelter showed up for the screening process, and most of them were really open about their trauma, and they really wanted to talk. We found that most of them wanted to share. Most of them even thanked us for listening to them. And so if I could tell you numbers, only one of them was really reluctant to share her story, but most of them were really willing to tell us what they had been through and how that shaped their view on the perspective of the shelter's care and the coexistence among the residents.
Nice.
Thank you.